things. And I may ask a few questions and you may talk back. And so people watching it, I'll repeat your question, or I'll repeat your comment, I should say, your input. And we'll go from there, because I'm not sure how it's all going to come out tonight. Usually I know exactly where I'm going. I know where I'm going, but I'm not sure how it's all going to come out tonight. After Sunday morning service, let me just get started here. First of all, obviously with Pastor Mitchell and Pastor Cluck, it's hard to believe, honestly, as a pastor. I mean, I've known him for many years, and I don't know him that well, didn't know him that well, but knew him well enough to be absolutely heartbroken, and just it's hard to even believe. It really is. I mean, if there's someone that gave and everything they could possibly give, and plus some, it was him. I mean, he rang his life out every at his age. It was amazing. 80, 85, 86, 87 years old, traveling all over the world, doing things that guys in their 30s couldn't even do. When he preached for us here, I told we should come up with Mitchell's vitamins. And I said, we should market Mitchell's vitamins. He said, Cary, come on, you're crazy, man. And I said, no, I mean, guys would buy them because there's something in you, man. But anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. But you be praying for that church. And honestly, I can't shake it. It really bothers me. Just broken by it, truthfully. It's just they're trying to think about it. I think about it all the time. It's just you always think he's going to be here forever, and he's gone. But we're here, and we're going to have a good time. And Esteban asked me something Sunday. He said, what was it like? Because we showed that video, me preaching, some of the other pastors. That was like, 25 or 30 years ago. And things were a little different. And he said, what's happened? What's changed? What's made things different? How come it's not like that now than it was back then? There are some factors that I want to talk about that are pretty widespread, and many pastors talk about it, and it may not even be, I don't think it's going to be, I know it won't be popular, some of the things I'm going to say tonight and lay it out. But as we go through this, some of these thoughts are still being developed, and maybe help me develop them, but I was thinking about some things. So let's just get right into it tonight. We're talking about Paul. We're talking about his ability or what he had in him, and he had a dimension of God's grace in his life that was remarkable. And we talked last week about people from another world. We talked about the peace of God, that one guy who'd gotten saved. And Paul, what he writes at this particular time is amazing. So let's get right into the verses. I'm going to read it. It's going to be a little different than what's up there, because I'm reading from the Living Bible translation. And I think that's going to be probably the King James Version. But you can follow with me. Philippians chapter 4 is our main verses. And I'm only going to give a couple verses out as I go through this. So let's get into it. Philippians 4, the Bible says, always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, and rejoice. Let everyone see that you are unselfish and considerate in all that you do. Remember that the Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs. And don't forget to thank him for his answers. If you do this, you will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than any human mind can understand. His peace will keep your thoughts and your hearts quiet and at rest as you trust in Jesus Christ. And now, brothers, as I close this letter, let me say one more thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true, what is good, and what is right. Think about those things that are pure and lovely, and dwell on the fine, good things in others. Think about all that you can praise God for and be glad about. Keep putting into practice all that you've learned from me and saw me doing, and the God of peace will be with you. So let's just get right into this, because like I mentioned last week, the Apostle Paul, I didn't get into it too much, but we're reading here, he's chained to a Roman prisoner. They chained him, he's chained to, like I said, a Roman guard, I should say, night and day. At this particular time, he's in house arrest, so he's able to move freely. He can't preach in public. He can only stay in his house for 2 years. He's waiting to be tried. Everything is, he has no idea how it's going to go. And at that particular time, Nero, they blamed the Christians for all kinds of things. They blamed the Christians for any problems. So they knew it was not going to go well. But here the Apostle Paul is in a home, but he's chained to a guard. And they changed these guards out on a regular basis. So many hours, the new guard would come, be chained to Paul. So he's in this place, and what's actually happening, there's Christians that don't like like Paul for some reason are speaking bad about him. Some are making it very difficult for him. And you can't believe Christians would do that. Some Christians are coming against Paul. I mean, you think about it. Here he's trying to do work for God. Some are speaking evil of him. And so nothing is going good, or nothing's going very good at all, actually. So here he's in this particular place. Again, I reemphasize, understand this. He's in this place. And he knows any day, he's fortunate because in this particular time, it doesn't happen here. It happens a little bit later that he's actually killed. But he doesn't know what's going to happen. He has no idea what's going to happen. Any day, any moment, they could come and either he's going to be acquitted or he's going to be beheaded or tortured. Most of the time, at that time, they tortured the Christians in the Colosseum. And he says something. He says something to the people in this church that he started, I think on his second missionary journey. He tells them to be happy. He tells them to always be happy, always be full of joy. In fact, listen to this. He talks about what I call the secret of Christian joy. At least 19 times in 4 chapters, he mentions joy, rejoicing, and gladness. And the question is, how can someone talk about joy, gladness? How can you talk about that literally any moment of any day? You can die. If there's ever a moment, it's one thing for someone to encourage someone when you're doing good, you feel good, you encourage someone, you're on top of it, things are going good. But when you are at supposedly the lowest moment in your life and you got the ability to speak life to others, that's amazing. And at this moment, he's telling people to rejoice, be full of joy, be happy. He tells them, don't worry about a thing. The one translation says, don't be anxious for anything. How can you say those things? What do you have that we don't have? What is the secret, Paul, in your life that you're encouraging us? We should be encouraging you. We're not under arrest. We're not made die anytime. It's you, not us. And yet you're speaking these words and telling us, don't worry about a thing. It's going to be okay. And so this dimension of God that's on his life, we all admire. He says in Philippians 4:13, I mentioned last week, where it says, I can do all things through Christ that gives me strength. And most people use that verse to do anything that they want to do. They just use that verse to give them the right to do it, supposedly. I have the strength for all things. I became master of all things. Another version says, I have the strength for anything. For I have strength because Christ strengthens me. So, but it's actually referring to, it's not talking about doing things. It's talking about the power to live above circumstances. When he says, I can do all things, you can do all things, Paul, but you can't get out of prison. You can do all things, Paul, but the Roman guard's not leaving you. You can get all things, Paul, but you can't change the verdict. You can do all things, so it doesn't apply like most Christians use it to do at all. In fact, it's talking about what Paul is saying, I can do all things. In other words, I have the strength by God's grace to make it through and live above the circumstances I find myself in. It's one thing to survive circumstances, but it's another thing to have a dimension of God's grace on your life where you rise above it and you're a conqueror. You have a dominion about you. The circumstances that's not where you live. You live above it. Paul clearly lives above it. And he says it. So it's one thing. We see it. We see what he says. We see what he does. And we all admire it. And he also says, for me to live is Christ. And there's something about that phrase that he uses, which I won't refer to. He talks about, I die daily. For me to live is Christ. That it really is the key to something that I probably want to zero in on. And I think it's something that really does need to be addressed. Remember I said, Paul says, I die daily. For me to live is Christ. That's saying a lot. I know people say it, but he actually lived it. How many know there's a big difference? I've shared this before. Let me share it again as an illustration. My condition, they call them autoimmune conditions, but mine in particular, my body attacks itself. Okay, attacks any place you have muscle or tendons. Well, muscle. I mean, come on. But muscles and tendons is your entire body. Your entire body has tendons and muscles. So my body is attacking the tendons and muscles 24/7, 7 days a week, every single day. And so sometimes it can be very uncomfortable. Other times arthritic pain because of my arthritis, blah, blah, blah. But it can be difficult at times. Sometimes just you can't really function for a few days. Then because of it, I get these headaches that come and go for a couple days. And so you add that with a few other things, it makes it difficult to do some things. And just waiting, sometimes I find myself just waiting to feel normal so I can get something done. It makes it, and because of the condition, it creates so many other problems because of the condition. Side effects of the condition create so many other problems because the body basically is working against itself. So is the church. Today, it seems like that what's not happening that needs to happen in all of our lives, not just preaching to myself, is that the body is not working like it should work. It's working against itself. The body ought to function differently than the way it's functioning generally today. And someone asked me, what was different back then? What's different today? Back then, it was more us. Today, it's about me. Today, it's about what I want. Back then, it's about what do we want. It was remarkably different. And because of that attitude, when it's about me, that means the body's not working like it. The body has to work together, right? We all know that. If the body's not working together, listen to me, it creates all kinds of problems in all different areas. Just like any medical condition. Let me give you an example. Philippians chapter 2. Paul, he writes, and I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. Paul writes, but I trust in the Lord to send Timothy to you shortly, that I also might be encouraged and I might know your state. Listen to what he says. For I have no one like-minded who will sincerely care for your state, for all seek their own, not the things which are of Jesus Christ. But you know his proven character, that as a son with his father, he served me in the gospel. These unmentioned men Paul refers to, all he says about, he doesn't name who they are, but no doubt Paul says, I have one man that basically has my heart. The other men do not have my heart. And you would think the early church, there'd be a lot of men around Paul, but Paul says, these guys don't have my heart. And he says, for these men, they seek their own. So these unmentioned men, he says, they seek their own, which basically means, the word means to crave after. It means to aim your life. It means to strive after something else. Paul looks around and says, I have men, but they're all striving after their own thing. But I have one man named Timothy that is different. He sincerely cares for you. In other words, these other men were selfish. You know, here's the reality. All of us, I'm talking about men and women, can be very good selfish Christians. I know it don't go together, but let's be honest, it does. Because I know you're a good selfish Christian. And today, that's acceptable. It's almost like saying it's day and night, same time. You're saying two different things completely, but today, it's kind of acceptable. Yeah, I'm very selfish. And sometimes we even say, yeah, I'm selfish. That's nothing to brag about. Paul says these men seek their own. Now, we're talking about, you think about this. Paul's talking about Timothy. Paul doesn't own Timothy, but there is a relationship with Timothy. Now, stay with me on this. Something has been lost because today, It's like this kind of a binding relationship, not based on I own you or possess your soul. No. Another place Paul says something like, go get John Mark for me and bring him to me. He's useful for me. Another version says, go get John Mark. He's helpful to me. He's profitable to me. He's not a liability, or he's serviceable. And one translation says, he's easy to make use of. In other words, I can use this man for almost anything. But in order for that to happen, the man has to be willing to be used like that. That relationship must be there in order it to become a reality. But today, this is what's not there. There's something not there, because now people are not willing to put their hands in to maybe give their life, or I say their life, it's not the best way to say it, but they're not willing to surrender to any kind of authority at all and make themselves available for God and the church. Put it that way. No, if this was written today, it would be get John Mark, and John Mark will say, take a hike, man. I'm my own man. I do what I want to do when I want to do it. You're useful. Why am I useful to you? I got my own thing. I got my own life. I got my own ministry. I got my own thing going on. That whole thing, it doesn't work. But that's how it's today. It's like today, it's like people have their own little agendas in the church. And I'm not saying it's like that here. Anyway, but people got their own little agendas. But I'm saying there's something that needs to be there, and the agenda needs to be, it's us. And we were willing to work with others. We're willing to subject ourselves in service to God and the church. I say the church, I'm talking about all of us together. He says, none of these men will sincerely care. Which means the thought there is they won't really care enough to promote your interest, to help you. But it also means to be troubled with. In other words, Timothy, you're the only man I know that is willing to allow people to trouble your life. You're the only man I know that people can interrupt your life and you're good with it. You're the only one who's like that, because you really care about those people. I think one thing people do not like is a fake and a phony. It's one thing to act like you care. It's another thing to genuinely care. We got to make sure we actually care. But the word also means to cut into pieces. In other words, having a man or a woman of God who's willing, their heart is like this. My heart is open to God. And yes, my life, I'm willing to cut my life into pieces if it's going to help you. I'm willing to allow you to interrupt my life, break up my plans if it's going to help you. That's called sincerely caring. Talking about men and women, allowing their lives to be interrupted by the phrase cut into pieces, interrupting their plans or maybe interrupting their desires. Now, living willing to be submitted or willing to say to another man, whether it's me as a pastor or to one of their brothers or to each other, I'm available. That whole attitude, that general attitude, it seems like it's just hard to find. We have it. Don't get me wrong. There are people like that, absolutely. And a lot of people will say that, but you can't really interrupt their life at all. And so my question would be, to live a life like Timothy, to live a life like John Mark, I'm available. How can I help? What can I do? You say, is that a good way to live or is that a bad way to live? At the end of the day, is that how you want to live? So let me ask you openly. Can we be so open? And ask the question. I was going to say Michael Jackson. It wasn't Michael Jackson. It was Michael Johnson. Magic Johnson. When he was the coach of the Lakers, he coached the Lakers for a short amount of time. And they asked him, why'd you quit? He said, I can't handle this generation. They're too soft. He said, I can't tell them nothing. They're unteachable. They think they know it all. They're a bunch of prima donnas. They're a bunch of soft, pampered, rich brats. He said, I can't, no, they drive me, I'll kill myself. It drove him nuts. He quit coaching in a short amount of time, just in and out. He said, no way. They're going to drive me nuts. So let me go back to ask you a question. Is this an okay way to live? Is it okay to be that open to God and what God's trying to do and build what God's trying to do on the earth? Let me tell you something about time. Time marches on. And you are not, I know you think you are not going to live forever. But people really think they are. They honestly don't think time's moving on. They honestly don't think that day's coming. They don't think like that. They really don't. They really think I'm going to keep living the way I live today. I'll live that way tomorrow. And it's going to go on and on and on. I have an unlimited amount of time. You have a very short amount of time on this earth. And at the end of it, you'll be glad you gave your life. You gave your life for God and the things of God, not yourself. But if you don't believe the days are going to end, you live like there's forever. So is it a good way to live where you can say like Paul, I die daily, or for me to live is Christ? Let me give you an example. And if you got a question, if it's a crazy one, I won't answer it. I'll answer it after the service because the millions are watching. But let me give you an example. And I share this because someone asked me Sunday morning. There was a time in my life, because he said, I want you to share some stories, some things you learned along the way. Well, there's a time in my life where I was preaching all over, traveling, preaching as an evangelist, going all over the world. And don't get me wrong, it was great life. I mean, they treat you like a rock star. You can go any place. All of our pastors are very good men. They take care of you well. They treat you well. You got a nice hotel. They feed you well. They pay you. They give you offerings. You finally start living normal, maybe. But it's good. But no one does it for that. But things were happening. I was booked like 2 years in advance, just booked. I mean, forever. And I said to him, to my pastor, I said, listen, I'm open, if you, something else. But I said, listen, I'm done evangelizing. I'm done. I have no desire to go to next week to preach at a church. I don't even feel called to preach. I said, I don't feel called to pastor a church. I don't feel called to do. I said, so I have no desire to do this. I am done doing this. I said, I'll go pioneer a church, I guess, or something. I don't know what I will do, but I'm done doing this. I said, I don't even go to the next meeting. I said, I will, because the pastor booked me. I'll go and I'll do as best I can. And I said, I don't want to do it. And I said, so what do you think? If you ask someone that, you'd be willing to listen. And I said, I want your take. I want to know what you think. And Pastor Mitchell is nothing like people think in their mind if you get to know them at all, not even close to it. He said, well, why don't you move to Prescott? I said, and evangelize. Oh, okay. I moved to Prescott and keep doing something I don't like doing. Yeah, sure. I can't wait. And I said, could I do that? He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't want to do this. Everything in me is, I don't want to move to Prescott. I do not want to do this at all. It's nothing. I'm done. He said, here's what he said. Well, Gary, I think it'd be good for you to move up here and spend some time with me. It'd be good for you to be around me and get to know you better. I said, Pastor, even though I don't want to do this, should I do it? He said, well, obviously you do a good enough job that people actually want to hear you. He said, I got a lot of guys, ain't no one want to hear them. So he told me. That's Pastor Mitchell. I said, well, I said, okay, then I'll move to Prescott. I'll keep doing what I don't want to do. And I did that. Was that a good thing to do or a bad thing to do? Now today, people say, oh, you should follow your dreams. Follow your feelings. Well, if I would have done that, I wouldn't be here preaching to you. Because I did that, he sent me here. People want the benefit of that, but they don't want to do it. I think people who get that, benefit from that, should live the same way they got benefited. How about you? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? If I would have said, no, I'm not doing that, that's not what I want to do, forget it, I ain't moving nowhere, I'm doing this, and I got my ideas, this is what I'm doing, that's not what I'm feeling, man. I'm not feeling it, man, like today, I'm not feeling that, so who cares? But at the end of the day, if I were to drop dead now and die and stand before my God, I could say, well, I went and there's people saved and their kids are saved and they're going to go on. Who knows what some of these young men will be. I think about it. I've thought about this a lot. I look at some of these young men. I think 20 years from today, I like to know what they're going to be doing. I believe they're going to be great men of God. Great men and women, great women of God. 20 years from today, even now, good men. I look at some of the young men. I think, I wonder he's going to be like when he's 40. They're thinking, 40, ancient of days, Pastor, come on. I think, my God, this man at 40, amazing. If he's just like that, at 40, there's potential way beyond myself. Paul said, I don't have anyone like-minded because I said yes against everything that today we would say you shouldn't do, I did. I didn't lose, people gained, and you gained. And I don't know how that would all work out in the end. I don't know that. In fact, Paul, this is kind of a different thought here. Man, you folks bring it out of me. Here's the difference today. The thought is this. They say people go. Listen, there's two thoughts here. Follow me. The number one speakers in the world today are people that have left their riches and they've taken up the rags. Listen to what I'm saying. People generally like to hear the story from rags to riches, right? Rags to riches. But the top speakers that millions will watch today are stories that go from riches to rags. Because the people that have the riches are asking the question, what made you give up that for this? And they realize the person that had everything and gave it all up, they found service, they found passion, they found hope, they found happiness, they found joy. And even though they're not Christian, I found life in serving others. And now they're saying, I want to hear a man some of these guys are top engineers and now they're monks. I'm not saying go be a monk. But people say, why you had all the money, that you left all of that and you did this. Right? And they say, because we found happiness, purpose, a reason for living. And all the main reasons they give are the same, basically the exact same things. Christian would fundamentally say the same things if the Christians did it. But Christians generally, but not all, follow me here, people get saved, if we can use the terms, they have rags and they get riches. Jesus calls his disciples, it's the opposite. They have riches, they leave their riches for the rags. The family business, they walked away from everything for nothing. Paul said, if you looked at it naturally, he was very successful. He was very popular. He was one of the most religious guys there was. He looks at his all that the world would call riches. He said, I count that as absolutely nothing compared to knowing Jesus Christ. I had everything, but I gave it up to follow him. So that's kind of the scenario. But today we come in and we have nothing and God gives us everything. And the challenge becomes when God gives us everything, we forget who gave us everything and very reluctant to give it up. You think, I got it. I'm not ever going to get it again if I don't hold on to it. That's not true. That's not true at all. And so it's a very hard sell to this generation. Give it all up, follow Christ, take up your cross. Are you crazy? Pastor Mitchell told me. He called me and says, that church you're going to, coming to Moreno Valley, no one wants to go there. I was on staff in Prescott. All the other evangelists were there. Pastor Mitchell offered to, listen, I was the least qualified on the list, but I was the most willing. He asked everyone first. He couldn't get one person to say yes. And he says, well, I ain't got no one else. He calls, Cary. There's a church that got all kinds of problems, but the pastor took off. People there are crazy. It's just what he said. He said, they're crazy. I don't think none of them will make it. They ain't got nothing. They ain't got a building. They ain't got nothing. I think they meet in the living room. I think they might have, I don't even know what they got, Cary, but they're crazy. I don't think any of them will make it. And I said, I'd love to go. They lose. And you know, when you do stuff like that, even your friends and people you know will say you're crazy. I've known people tell me that it has to be the dumbest move you ever made in your life. Cary, don't you understand? No one wanted to go there for a reason. Duh. But you know, you push me, I'll push back. And I've told guys, that's why I don't want to be like you. Older, but definitely colder. Okay, now let me get into my sermon. I haven't even got to the first part of it yet. And I really can't. Because it's already 31 minutes and 38 seconds. So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you one question, then you guys can make a comment. Why is this so hard to do? To say yes, and everything within you says that's not I want to do, or why is it such a battle for folks to surrender to God? Why? Input? Uh-huh. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Someone else could comment about what I'm saying? Have you ever struggled surrendering to God? You had to think. No, yeah, absolutely, right? We all have. Let's be honest, right? Come on. Absolutely. So now. Mm. Yep. Yep. That's right. That's right. And and God uses people, right? But He uses me or uses Pastor Mitchell or using someone else to help you. At the end of the day, we're all human. We may make errors, but there is a God in heaven who oversees our lives. Before I came here, Pastor Mitchell offered me at that time a large church. We say large church. 35, 40 years ago, it was 100 and some people. Back then, for us, it was a large church. It had everything. He supported pastor, had everything. He offered me that. And I said, no. I said, I'm going to go and he's offered me this. And you would look at it naturally, right? And go, why in the world would you take this? So you make these choices. And probably for years, there's things that have to work its way out. But how many know we make a choice today? We may not see the benefit for 20 years. Whether it's Pastor Mitchell, whether it's myself, there's obviously coming a day, every one of myself included, I will know you will never not hear my voice anymore unless you watch a sermon online. And you decide how you're going to order your life and what you're going to do with your life. But this life is very short. And one of the reasons, and I didn't really get into it, and I'll get into it next week, or actually the week after, I think Paul had this dimension of grace, because I believe the dimension of grace in some man's life at times is proportionate to the amount of surrender in a man's life. You show me a man who's really surrendered, I'll show you a man who's anointed, and I'll show you a man, for some, you can't figure it out, who can rise above and live above their circumstance. You show me a person or a man says, I'm available. Like even when this all happened, I told my own pastor, Pastor Greg and Pastor Rich, and I'm not the best friends with Pastor Rich or none of these guys, best buddies. But I said, I'm available. Anything we can do to help you, we're here for you. I don't think we lose by surrendering and making ourselves available. Because why would you do that? It's for others and it's for God. And you realize, no, I'm not doing it just for this. I'm doing it for Him. And let the chips fall where they fall. Why don't you bow your heads tonight? I know this has been a different type service. And I hope you understand what I'm trying to get across. There's people here tonight, I don't know where you're at and what you're deciding to do or not do. I don't know where, as we would say, where your head's at or your heart's at. But I do know this one thing, that there are a lot of people that need you. There's a lot of people in this city within walking distance, 5 minutes of the city, that are hurting, that are broken, they're addicted, they're lost in their sin. And we will not reach these people if our whole life just is about us. Paul said, I don't have anyone that would care for these people. Timothy, you're the only one. Because I believe in caring for others and trying to. We're not perfect. We fall, we fail at it. But in trying, God honors that. And somehow it all works its way out, and God blesses people that make those sacrifices. Say yes when everyone else says no. So before I open these altars, you're a Christian in this place tonight. And you say, you know what, God, there's things you're talking to me about my heart. I don't know how it's going to play itself out, but tonight, this moment, you're asking me to surrender. I'm not sure what that even means. But God, I really do want your heart for others. I want to make my life count while I have time. You're here tonight, you're a believer. Say, you know, God, you're talking to me. Raise your hand quickly.